This video will teach you how to write early childhood English language arts objectives using a three-part objective format that is based on the student learning standards. First, review the New Jersey State ELA student learning standards. Pick a grade level indicator and be sure that you are not using the anchor standards. The anchor standards are what is expected to be learned by the end of high school. So make sure that you're using the indicator that is for the grade level. You'll notice the way the standards are organized. The first page in a particular topic will be the anchor standards that are for high school, and then the next page shows you what is expected for your grade level. And then you're going to develop a learning objective from the grade level indicator. So let's talk about how we make writing objectives using a three-part format. You're going to love this in the end. It's a little work to get started, to get used to it, but it will be so helpful to you in so many ways. First, when we create performance-based objectives, we have three parts to them. The first is the target behavior. You get this from the standard. That comes right out of the language of the standard. The second is the condition under which the behavior occurs. So what kind of support or how are you going to help the child to get to that behavior? And the third part is the criteria. What do you expect them to be able to do? What's your criteria for success? So another way to look at this is, what do you want them to do? How do they do it? And how much or how well do they have to do it? A caveat to this: when you are focusing on what do you want them to do, make sure that the behavior is observable. It's something that you can see the children do. We don't use the terms understand or learn because we can't directly observe those things. We can't see a child learn. We can't see a child understand. So we use behaviors to infer that they're learning. So make sure that what you want them to do is an observable behavior. Let's do some examples. Example 1, let's start with the standard. This is from the reading informational text in 3rd grade, so this is a reading comprehension standard. RI 3.2, notice how the second number is the 3. That tells me I have the grade level indicator for 3rd grade. It's the second standard. So the way the code works is RI is reading informational text, the 3 is 3rd grade, and 2 means that it's the second standard in that area. Here's the standard. Determine the main idea of a text, recount the key details, and explain how they support the main idea. Now we're going to break it into 3 parts. First is to identify the main idea and key details. I took that directly from the standard. They're going to do that by reading chapter 3 and writing information in the writer's notebook. And what I'm looking for is the correct main idea and 3 key details that support the main idea. That's what I want to see in order for them to pass or get the highest score. So we write this then as students will be able to identify the correct main idea and 3 key details that support the main idea from chapter 3 and write them in their writer's notebook. Here's another example. Again, we're going to start with the standards. This is from kindergarten writing standards. WK2, again, notice the W stands for writing, the K stands for kindergarten, the 2 stands for the second standard in the writing section. Use a combination of drawing, dictating, and writing to compose informative or explanatory text in which they name what they are writing about and supply some information about the topic. Here's our performance-based objective. First part, what do we want them to be able to do? Students will be able to write labels for a drawing on the topic of pets. How are they going to do that? Using a word map and invented spelling. So I know that I've been using a word map with my students already. They know how to use that for support, and they know how to use some invented spelling. What am I looking for? That I want to see some initial consonants are identifiable. Most of my students can't yet hear the ending consonant or the middle consonant, so I'm looking for just the initial consonants in their invented spelling. So here's my objective. Students will be able to write labels for a drawing on the topic of pets using a word map and invented spelling with some initial consonants identifiable. Here's example number 3. We're going to start with the standards. This is from the first grade reading foundational skills standard. So again, you notice the RF is reading foundational skills. The 1 is first grade. The 2 is the second indicator in that section. Demonstrate mastery of spoken words, syllables, and sounds, which is phonemes, by using knowledge that every syllable must have a vowel sound to determine the number of syllables in a printed word. Now for this indicator, there's a bunch of sort of substandards in here. There's A, B, C, D, E. We're only going to use one of those letters. So if you find that there's a standard that has multiple indicators in it, you can use just one of them. Often that's too much to teach in one lesson, so keep it simple and just use one. For me, I'm going to use distinguish long from short vowel sounds in spoken single syllable words. So here's our objective. The target behavior, students will be able to distinguish long from short vowel sounds. Where did I get that from? The standard. How are they going to do it? In spoken single syllable words. Notice that they don't have to write down the vowels. I just want them to be able to hear them in spoken words and only in single syllable words. We're not yet using multiple syllable words. So it's important that we have this second piece that says how they're going to do it, because that makes it much easier or much harder. And what am I looking for? I want them to get all 5 vowels correct. We've been doing this all year, so I want them to get all 5 vowels correct. Here's my objective. Students will be able to distinguish long from short vowel sounds in spoken single syllable words correctly for all 5 vowels. Here's our 4th and final example. We're going to start with the standards. This is from the preschool language standards. Notice that L means language, PK means pre-K, and 4A, it's the 4th grade level indicator in that section. Begin to determine the meaning of new words and phrases introduced through preschool reading and content. And again, I'm only going to use letter A. There's a lot of letters here, so I only want to use letter A. I'm keeping it simple, focusing on one thing. With guidance and support, generate words that are similar in meaning. So here's my performance-based objective. The target behavior. The students will be able to generate words that are similar in meaning. How are they going to do that? With prompting, because my standard tells me they're allowed to be prompted or to get support or guidance. So my guidance is going to be prompting. When creating a drawing of the 3 bears in the Goldilocks story. So I'm linking it back to a story that was read, which again is in the standard. And I want them to use 2 similar words. I'm not expecting anything more than just 2 similar words. Here's my standard. Here's my objective. Students will be able to generate 2 words that are similar in meaning with prompting when creating a drawing of the 3 bears in the Goldilocks story. Now, why is this so important and so cool? Well, because now if you write it in this 3-part format, your assessment is done. Your 3-part objective becomes the assessment. It tells you exactly what the students have to do in order to meet the objective. And a performance assessment is usually the independent practice part of your lesson. So typically you've modeled for the students, then you've practiced it with them, and then they're going to try to do it on their own. So that's what I mean by the independent practice part of your lesson. When you write the lesson plans, this 3-part objective is going to show up as the independent practice part. So it's nice and tight. It shows up in the standard, it shows up in your 3-part objective, it shows up in the independent practice part of the lesson, and it will show up as your assessment. The other thing that's so cool about this is when you're doing differentiation, you've got kids that are, gifted in the same classroom that you've got kids with IEPs or children that are struggling or English language learners. The way you do differentiation is to modify one of these 3 aspects to your objective. So maybe you have children with IEPs that are significantly below grade level, and you're going to change the target behavior. So you're actually going to use a different standard, a different indicator. You might have to go back a grade level. Maybe you're in 3rd grade, but you're using the kindergarten standard. Or you can modify the conditions so that the student gets more support. They get prompting or peer support, or they get a graphic organizer to use, or they get a word bank, or they get some of the questions partially filled in. Those are all ways to modify the conditions. And then finally, we can modify the criteria for success. So remember, I wanted to have the students be able to demonstrate all 5 vowels. Well, maybe for some students who are just struggling a little bit, they're only going to identify 1 or 2 of the vowel sounds, the long and short vowel sounds. So again, I can change any one of these 3 things to modify my lessons for children who need more support or less support. So that's why the 3-part objective makes so much sense. It'll make it so much easier for you to plan your lessons if you start with really strong objectives.